Thank you so much, gentlemen. Always insightful. Anthony Smith, our lead economist. We'll catch up with you a little bit later in the show for another shipper update, and maybe you'll join me to host the rest of the show, too. Who knows? Right now, I'm joined by our host and author of Loaded and Rolling, Thomas Wasson. Thomas, how are you doing today, my friend?
Pleasure to be on. Always a pleasure. Definitely a lot of fun stuff going on. So
yeah, let's before here we were talking about different things were on your mind today, and it's changed a little bit with the Ukraine situation. You want to dig into that a little bit, or?
Correct. So we're going to talk about the rails, and we're talking about the rails and intermodal stuff, especially how it relates to carriers. Super important. So the original story was that carriers you're seeing a lot more trucking capacity because of rail delays at the ports, and so. Taking that to a segue with recent events and stuff, I get really, really interested because when we talk about rails, we also forget that in other countries, truckload, intermodal, and rail transportation provide a huge and important role.
Sure.
So when we're talking about things like even Ukraine, a fun fact, in Europe there's different sizes of rails. And many people would not consider this interesting, but most of Central Europe going up through the old Soviet bloc uses 1 gauge of rail. It's a certain size. By the time you reach Ukraine in the old Soviet bloc, the rail gauge widens a little bit to a Russian standard. And so a very fun factoid about anytime we're talking about intermodal, especially even intra-European rail transport, you have to find a segue to stop at the rail line, pull all your stuff off,
okay.
Intermodal, transload it to the next rail car that is on the correct track and move forward. So this is a fun little factoid because as we're seeing current political developments, if we're thinking about trucking, there is a trucking angle, sir.
That is very, very interesting, and leave it to you to find that out. And you are, this is one of those things, like you said, most people don't find that very interesting, but you certainly do, and it is a fun fact. And that's really interesting. Imagine that here, if, you left Tennessee and you'd have to change, rail gauge going into Georgia.
Take the Amtrak, we just hit Atlanta. Sorry, let's hop on a brand new train that's parallel to you, and then we're gonna go on it because maybe Georgia decided they wanted a 1/4 inch thinner. So,
that's insane.
Huge ramifications. Though. We're talking about in a geopolitical context. Armies, commodities, supply chains use the same concepts. We put it on the rail, and then we either transport it via truck or we cross-load it somewhere and it moves in. So when we're looking at the context even of a Russian invasion of Ukraine, they are actually built around transporting on the rail. So you can almost say, well, I don't know what's going on. Let me pull up a rail map of Ukraine and Russia, and you'll kind of see, generally speaking, what maybe the next tourist route's going to be because when you have such large distances, whether it be the United States or other countries, putting it on the rail is the most cost-effective and practical solution. And then once you arrive, you have drayage and intermodal shifting it back out. So pay close attention to this. Many people are going to talk about how far you can go. Well, unfortunately, if you're limited by the rails, you can only go as far as your next railhead. And if you're only able to disembark from the railhead, you're only as limited as how many trucks you have. We're circling back to the trucks because if you look at the size, second random fact, it's really hard to transport stuff.
Sure.
We have an entire private trucking industry that transports stuff. Well,
Even
in the military context.
Military logistics is incredibly important.
Incredibly important.
So behind the scenes that wins and lose wars.
Correct. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics.
Yes.
Ironically for Russia, while they have heavier tube artillery and air defense systems, a 3-to-1 ratio compared to our units, very unfortunate, they don't have enough trucks.
Yeah.
That's why they usually are actually prepared to do disembarking from the rail. They learned that from World War II. They learned their lesson really quick. They'd straight up go off the rail, the ramp would come down, and it's go time. So you're going to watch this and see kind of how many trucks do you have. If you have enough trucks, you can go farther. If you don't have enough trucks, you're going to have a bad time. So we saw a lot of footage and stuff. You can look at it on Twitter of all these missiles and rockets and tube artilleries. Just for one example, based on their supply chain capabilities, if they did one launch, it would take the entire battalion's truck ability to simply refuel the tubes. So whether it be commodities and trucking or geopolitical events, the truck plays a huge outsized role.
Oh yeah. You've got all the supplies for not only the actual military hardware, like the tube artillery, et cetera, but also for all the militia, all the people that are there, right? All the soldiers. You got all those supplies and all that other kind of stuff.
They used to call them Army bullets, beans, and bandages.
Yeah. What else is on the loaded and rolling mind?
So on the second one, we're hitting the newsletter now. We did some deep dive into driver health care.
Okay, cool.
So it's really hard, by the way, to preface this, it's really hard to figure out how healthy truck drivers are. The government, normally what you do is you sit at a truck stop and you ask a bunch of people, hey, are you healthy? And they fill out a form. So just imagine that. So we have one nationwide like full-on piece that looks at it. It started in 2010, it completed in 2014, and it was like the National Index of like long-haul trucking and health.
Yeah.
Huge thing. I'm just gonna boil it down. Basically, over the course of a few years, they sat at these truck stops and they did a statistically representative sample of the entire US. First time it was ever done, and unfortunately, no one else has really done a lot. The results are very striking, unfortunately. 40% of all truck drivers do not have health insurance, compared to 14% of the general population. Then also, 69% reported themselves as either obese, 70% had reported as a higher risk for heart disease, and also I think 61% reported a chronic stressful situation, which you can imagine being on the road.
But all of those things make sense when you think about the life of a trucker. It's not easy to be, calm. Yes. Because you got people like you driving around them. No, I'm just kidding.
It's Chattanooga.
But I mean, you're in the truck. You're doing so. It can be very sedentary at times and difficult to eat healthy and find places to exercise and be healthy, right?
Completely. We're looking at a sedentary lifestyle that involves being on the road for prolonged periods of time, and in an area that is actually, if you took you and me, it'd be a little around the same size. We put a little box here, and that's what you're living in for 3 to 4 weeks out on the road, and you're eating truck stop food that's mass processed, pre-processed.
Yeah, roller dogs and stuff like that is probably the most common thing you could get.
Yeah, exactly. So we're in a situation where we're talking about a driver shortage. There's also a healthcare crisis for these truck drivers. They're automatically at a higher age. Your average truck driver is 46 years old. Their average income right now is $47,000 a year. If we took that and adjusted it for inflation, they actually lost more money since the 80s by 40 to 50% in terms of their actual earnings. And so everyone's going to point fingers. If I knew the answer, I'd be a very rich man, but unfortunately I don't. I can just describe facts and figures.
I'm with you.
And so the challenge is, and the opportunity that we highlight on is, how can carriers address this? How can we create a situation where we have a 95% turnover on a good day? The big question to CEOs and industry leaders is going to be, what can we do to make this job healthier, safer, and have a better quality of life? You work LTL, you go home every night. You work local parcel delivery, you at least have some semblance. You work long haul, you're pretty much married to the road. And so it is a huge underreported challenge.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, LTL in itself is a workout. Go drive an LTL route for a day.
And the boxes
you're going to want to rest the next day.
This is what let's talk about dedicated distribution centers. They're extremely physical. You literally are taking a dolly in the back of this trailer, stacked all the way high, and you're just pulling it around.
You're in and out. You're throwing up doors. You're doing all that kind of stuff. It's a grueling job. LTL. I had a lot of difficult time. You bring over the road guys who want to stay home every night and put them into an LTL environment. The vast majority of them didn't last very long because it's a completely different job. It's not nearly as the same, not even close, as over the road. Right? It's a very difficult thing to take one and do the other. Right?
Exactly. And closing thoughts on that. The reason why that 40% could possibly be the case is because a lot of drivers are independent owner-operators or contractors.
And so they don't have the money to spend on their health insurance. There's no affordable health insurance that is there. That's what I was going to ask you there. I'm glad you circled back to that because I forgot about that.
We had this deregulatory event in 1980.
Yeah.
Carriers needed to save costs. They also need to get rid of used trucks. So we create this cadre of owner-operators here, and so it can help the owner-operators sometimes make more money, but statistically, they actually end up losing in the end because of truck repair bills, lack of health care, and having to pay out of pocket for many of these problems while they're offloaded older vehicles. So, this is something that I'll examine in further research and interviews, that be careful what you wish for. You want to pick your own loads, but it comes at a cost for
It
large
absolutely
carriers.
does. It absolutely does. Thank you so much for being here, Thomas. Hey, listen, check him out. Loaded and rolling. When is it on? When does it air?
Mondays, 2:30 Eastern, and then bi-weekly newsletters.
There you go. Check it out. Very, very good information.